no reminder, it was almost exactly a year ago today that New York City went through the most extraordinary transition in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the course of the year, our team and the participants at the door have been nothing short of heroic. And we hope that as a staff, we've done a good job of updating you on how our model has not only been revolutionized over the course of the year, but also how we've continued to ensure that the door has been relevant and continues to meet the needs of the young people that rely on us day in and day out. The intention of tonight's panel is to both review what has been a surreal year, but also to set the stage for our reemergence this spring and into the summer, as both New York City and the door pivot into another new normal. I'll be back at the close of tonight to help lead the question and answer at the conclusion of the panel. But for now, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, colleague, and the door board's longtime president, Marc DeBevoise, who will introduce the panel. Thank you to all of you for your ongoing support of the door and Broome Street Academy and for joining us again tonight and ongoing for another look at our remarkable organization. Thank you so much, and take it away, Marc.
Thanks, Eric. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marc DeBevoise, the president of the Doors Board, and on behalf of that board and our entire community, I want to really thank you for joining us tonight. It has been a beyond complicated year for us all. COVID and the economic and unemployment crisis it created have made it incredibly difficult for our young people and our team on multiple levels. We've had to navigate a situation that made in-person services, which are so fundamental to our model, basically impossible. And now as things open up more, they're still extremely complex, something we expect will remain so for the foreseeable future. Prior to the pandemic start in early 2020, we were set to improve on a banner 2019 in terms of the young people we serve. And since then, we've innovated every day and continue to serve them. This has generated important changes in how we operate, many of which we'll keep, and you'll hear more about that tonight. One of the more impressive stats that I've heard is that from April to December 2020, we averaged 600 televisits a month, and we had never done one prior to that. So thanks to our dedicated and innovative teams, we've been able to stay connected with young people and ensure that they continue to be able to access services and the support important to them. In some ways, things are getting better. The new federal administration is proving itself to be good for the door and the young people we serve. The rollout of vaccines is making it possible for us to begin resuming in-person services, and the door is working to ensure that members of our community, including staff and young people, have access to vaccines and effective information about their safety and efficacy. The door is strongly positioned to play a critical role as NYC transitions from crisis response toward recovery. And our work is vital to a strong recovery because the crisis has hit communities we serve disproportionately hard. The American Rescue Plan signed into law last week will make a real difference in the lives of disconnected youth. And while 2020 was a very complicated funding environment, the door remained healthy and its outlook more positive than we expected. So while it's a complicated time, it's also an inspiring one, and one where we are dedicated to our efforts to support our young people and their communities. Now, prior to moving to the main event of tonight, our panel, I would be remiss not to mention our CEO and my incredible board colleagues. As many of you know, Eric is leaving us for a great position leading the Metz Foundation at the end of this quarter. The board and I want to thank him for giving his whole self to the door for the past 4+ years and for his incredible contributions to the growth and success of our organization. Thank you, Eric. And we are well on our way to determining the next CEO, having our board as engaged as I have ever seen them in my over 10 years with the door board. And we are closely partnering with our leadership team on how we are moving the organization forward. So with that, I'm extremely pleased to introduce our panel tonight, led by Susan Notkin, Senior Vice President of the Center for the Study of Social Policy. She's an incredible industry and program expert, especially in the core areas we operate in at the door, and also one of my colleagues on the door board. And I feel incredibly lucky to have her as part of our door family and to introduce her here to lead the panel of our incredible team leaders that includes Peter G., our Interim Executive Director, Holly Harrison, Director of College and Academic Services, and Renee McConey, Managing Director of Health Services. So with that, thank you all. I really look forward to the conversation. And Susan, I'll leave it to you to take it away. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Marc. And I hope my panelists will let themselves off of, let's see your beautiful faces. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's really an honor to be here with you all to talk and hear about the Doors journey over this past year, where we are today, where we've been over the past year, what we see in the immediate future, and also what our vision is for the role that the Door can play as part of the city's recovery. I'm going to ask a series of questions of my panelists, but I encourage you to write whatever questions you want in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to that at the end of today's program. So obviously, this past year has been one of incredible sorrow, uncertainties, inequities, and also disruption. But it's also been a year where we have witnessed remarkable resilience, resilience in our staff and our leadership, resilience in the organization as a whole, and without question, resilience shown by the young people that the Door serves. So to kick this off, I'd like you each to talk about what inspired you this past year, what kept you going to be able to show up day in, day out, despite what you were personally going through in order to be able to serve the Doors young people with the type of excellence that we are known for. So whoever would like to take it away, please answer.
Good evening. I'm Renee McConey. I'm the Managing Director for the Health Center here at the Door. And what inspired me over this last year is just seeing my staff and providers come together and making sure young people got excellent care during this pandemic. Our vision in the health center is to ensure that young people receive access to high quality health care and receive an excellent patient experience. And during this pandemic, we did not lose sight of that. We had to physically close exactly a year ago today, March 16th, and we had to quickly pivot to telehealth services. Staff and providers came together to make sure services never stopped. They mailed medication and birth control to young people. They mailed lab kits such as HIV test kits and pregnancy test kits to young people. They even mailed eyeglasses and safe sex kits. The dental hygienist mailed oral hygiene kits, toothbrushes, and provided education to young people over the phone. And health educators made sure to reach out to young people who were due or who had scheduled appointments coming up to make sure that they had the services that they needed. And it was challenging for everyone. We wanted to make sure our young people had services available to them, mental health services, medical services, even while managing their own, as you mentioned, Susan, managing their own issues at home, taking care of kids who were now homeschooling and caring for loved ones. They forged through. So my staff, I have to say, without a doubt, kept me inspired to keep going throughout this year and making sure young people had the services that they needed.
Thanks so much, Renee.
Thanks so much, Susan, and thanks, Renee, for sharing that. So my name's Peter G. I'm the Interim Executive Director. And when I think about what's inspired me in the past year at the Door, it's really the fact that the Door continues to be a place where young people are able to get access to services that allow them to exercise self-determination, despite living in a moment in time right now where we've lost even more control over things happening in our life. And so to illustrate, I just wanted to share a quick win, that a colleague recently shared with me. A young person became a new member of the Door, and his intake counselor became concerned about him based on the amount of stressors he was reporting in his life. He joined the waiting list for our counseling services, and in the meantime, he connected with our community mental health advocate. They worked really closely together to identify coping strategies to deal with being quarantined and in an unsafe home environment. And when he was kicked out of that environment, this team member was able to quickly help him get connected to our Runaway Homeless Youth program. And they did an assessment, help him deal with his crisis, connect him with long-term housing options, and made arrangements for him to come into the Door in person to get food and clothing. Facing crisis during COVID is especially brutal, But we're really grateful that we've had systems in place to ensure that he already had established strong relationships with staff and knew exactly where to turn when things went wrong. And this is one of the many stories happening at the door on a daily basis. And stories like this inspires me to continue to advance the door's mission.
It is inspiring. Holly.
So I've been at the door for just a little bit over a year now. I arrived just before the pandemic. And in the year that I've been at the door, I've been so inspired by door staff because everyone shows up every day to give everything that they can for young people. And it feels like every conversation ends with the question, what else? What else can we do to support young people? What else can we give them? What other opportunities can we create? What else can we do to support one another? And when I look at my calendar and I see the spaces that staff create for meeting with young people, for meeting with one another, for supporting each other through the work, that's what really, really inspires me. People want to give everything possible to make sure that our young people are getting the best quality services that are out there. And that's what inspires me.
Well, you've inspired me, and I'm sure you have inspired all the people that are listening to us today. So Peter, the defining characteristic of the door is its integrated model, right? With its sort of wraparound, with wraparound services to meet whatever the needs are that a young person has, and all under one roof. So how did you do that? How did you try to continue to deliver services under the realities of what was presented with the pandemic when we had to shut down and services were not able to be open?
That's a great question, Susan. So, I just think all of us at the door should be really proud that in 2020, even with COVID-19, we served like 7,800 young people with over 100,000 services. And as you mentioned, one of the strengths of the door is that the success of our integration between programs has been the physical proximity of being in a co-located space. So a young person that becomes a member of the door does a tour of the building so that they can see and get introduced to team members of programs they expressed interest in. Another example from a staff perspective is if a young person they're working with needs another service from another program area, they could literally just walk them there to give them a warm handoff. And obviously COVID-19 made all this significantly more difficult. However, we've continued to find ways to make the integrated model still functional in a hybrid service environment. I'm excited and grateful to our membership team that worked very quickly early on to make our membership process virtual. So in many ways, right now, there are no physical barriers to becoming a member of the door. We pushed into departments to give guidance to team members on how to do a virtual needs assessment of young people they're working with and how to do a warm handoff virtually. And we've expanded our use of technology to communicate with young people, including a new texting platform. We continue to rely on our shared system to track outcomes and all the things that made the door a very special place, like case conferencing and other forms of collaboration between departments. It's still happening right now, just virtually. And I'm excited that as we steadily reopen the building more and more, and go to this new stage of reopening that I'll talk a little bit later in April, that we'll be able to do even more.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Peter. So Holly, Peter was just talking about the services that you have to offer and the programs, the amazing programs that the door offers. And we know that young people, anyone really, they come to a program, they come to an organization because they hear about a program, because they hear about a service, but they keep coming back to a service because of the relationships that they form with the workers, the relationships that they form with other young people. So how did you try to build and sustain relationships virtually?
That's a really, really good question, because the relationships between staff and young people at the door is part of what makes the door so special. It's part of what makes the community there so special. And so when we went remote, we didn't want to lose that. So we immediately pivoted to trying to communicate with young people on Zoom, to communicate with young people via text, over the phone, but it all depends on what young people are comfortable with. So I work with a young man that on the phone, you can only get a 2-word answer. Via text, you get volumes.
Mhm.
So you really just have to work with where the young people are comfortable, and also letting them know that we still care and we're still committed to them on the same level. So every conversation, we're assessing what their needs are, what the gaps are, and filling those gaps to make sure that if someone has housing insecurity or food insecurity, we're connecting them with staff members that can help them address those needs. So it's really about just making sure that they know that we care and that we're doing everything that we can to address those needs, and we're going to meet them where they are, however that means, whether that means via phone, via text, via Zoom, we're right there.
Thank you so much, Holly. And it's those relationships that are transformational and help young people take advantage of the wonderful programs that the door has to offer. So Renee, you talked in the beginning about all the services that, how you've tried to pivot at the health center. And, without question, I do think that so often a crisis can be an opportunity for change. And so tell us about how let's go into a little bit more detail about how service delivery changed at the health center, and whether there were any things that you discovered that you said, hey, wait a second, this may be something we even want to keep, we did it out of necessity, but we might want to keep it going even after the pandemic is over.
Right. So in March, a year ago, we had to pull out all the stops. We couldn't get in the building, so we had to really make sure that the staff and providers had the tools that they needed so we can quickly pivot to telehealth services. We really had to work very quickly to make sure the staff had laptops in their hands, had hotspots so they can get Wi-Fi at home, cell phones, printers, scanners, so they can do their work from home. And we found that the staff was very adaptable to that. And it worked over the last year. And patients were very receptive to that. We had to expand our electronic health record so we can do telehealth services effectively for the provider and for the patient, so they can meet in a seamless manner. We started using DocuSign so patients can fill out their forms and in an electronic way. And it did take some adjustment for young people to get used to using a DocuSign, but they're very amenable, right? And we also maximize the text line. We have our own text line in the health center, and we expanded it. Typically, our text line was just for health education questions, but we opened it up so young people can make appointments. We were already using the portal, but we maximized using the portal, and providers used it even more to communicate with young people, and young people were able to communicate with us 24 hours a day. We added Zoom accounts so our counselors could do HIPAA compliant, very safe telehealth psychotherapy counseling sessions with young people on a weekly basis. And we use social media, and all of these things, we use social media so we can communicate with young people. We know that our young people are on Facebook and Instagram and other platforms. So we use that to communicate with young people. And we're finding that these things work. Every young person has a cell phone in their hand, right? So the use of technology is probably going to stay with us. We're going to continue to do telehealth services. We're going to continue to maximize the patient portal and some of the other tools that we implemented over the last year. And we found that it works very effectively.
Renee, remind me, I thought I remember you once saying that the no-show rate for your clinical services, for mental health services, had decreased significantly when you were able to. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that was surprising to me.
Right. So with our counseling sessions, when they were in person, we found that a lot of young people did not show up for their in-person appointments pre-pandemic. But if someone can do it from home and in the comfort of their room, we're finding that young people are showing up. And actually one young person actually told their therapist that therapy is literally all that's keeping me going right now. So they show up for these weekly sessions because it's important to them. This pandemic has been very challenging for a lot of young people. We're seeing an increased demand for services. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of isolation, a lot of change to routines. They're not going to school in the same way. They're not interacting with their friends in the same way. So we're seeing an increase in need for mental health services, and these kids are showing up for their appointments because all they have to do is log into that Zoom account and meet with their therapist at the same time every week. So we're finding that the kids are showing up for those services.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, because what we're hearing about the impact of COVID and everything else associated with it on the mental health
Yes.
needs and the anxiety levels are really scary. So to know that there's a service and that you're able to reach out to young people with all sorts of creative ways is really reassuring. So Peter, we know that an organization is only as good as its staff. And without question, the door has an amazing staff. But could you talk about what you've been doing, you and your colleagues, to sort of keep morale high? Again, given the uncertainty of these days.
I'm going to repeat a phrase from our CEO that each and every day I'm surrounded with incredible colleagues whose commitment to our young people is nothing less than heroic. And like you said, Susan, the challenges we have as a workplace is to simultaneously balance two things. It's an incredibly difficult time to be a human being right now. And this need to ensure that the young people we serve have access to vital services they need right now. And since we're not all in person anymore, we found ways to build community on the staff end by adding more all staff meetings, staff support groups, and affinity groups. We have had more working committees than ever before, ranging from a weekly reopening committee that we started a year ago that was supposed to be temporary because we thought this would end very quickly, to our incredible racial equity and inclusion working group that delivered a great report to senior leaders about things we could be doing better around REI, to meetings that happen on a more regular basis with our partners in labor. So any success the door has experienced in the past year is really due to our incredible program staff at the organization that have been really adaptive problem solvers. And building community is just a key ingredient to that. And I do want to just also acknowledge the other key ingredient to our success that has made all this possible is our incredible dozens of administrative team members at the organization that deployed hundreds of pieces of technology for staff and young people. They've continued to go in on a daily basis to keep our building safe and clean. They've fundraised to keep our doors open and much more. In sum, as we say at the door, it really does take a village.
Yeah. It's such a testimonial to the staff that they have, discovered all sorts of new ways of meeting the needs of young people and being creative and being responsive and meeting the needs of each other and supporting each other to get through this really, unprecedented past year. So I always think of the door before this happened as just a place where brilliance shone, where it was the brilliance of the young people and the brilliance of the staff and the brilliance of the model. And there's no question that it continues to shine in a very different way, but still very, 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 strongly in this past year. So kudos to all of you. So Renee, where are you now? Where are we now? What has resumed in person? What's still hybrid? Tell us a little bit about where the door is today on March 16th.
So over the last year, we learned very quickly about telehealth. I can't stress that enough, that it was a very quick pivot. But we realized that there are some young people who do want to be seen in person, and some services just can't be done by telehealth. Labs can't be done. Some physical assessments can't be done. Dental, optometry can't be done by telehealth. So we've been very careful and thoughtful about how we roll out in-person services. So in May, we literally rolled out 1 half day. So our clients coming from legal services who need their immigration exams can come in and get those done as part of their application. So that was May. June, we added a couple of medical days so patients can come in and get some labs. Again, being very thoughtful about how we're rolling this out to make sure there's social distancing and everyone is screened. July, we ramped up a little bit more. November, we did a bigger push. So we're open in person. I'm here in the space. I'm here at the health center. We're here 5 days a week now, 10 to 6, but we're also open virtually 10 to 6. So patients do have a choice of whether or not they want to come in person or if they want to continue to do telehealth visits. Counseling is working by telehealth, but we did want to expand our medical services in person and virtually. So we have the dentist here and the dental hygienist is here 5 days a week. Our optometrist is doing vision care for our young people. He's here 1 day a week. We have medical providers here 5 days a week. Our lab is open every day. We can dispense medication and birth control every day. And that's going to be our model. We are bringing more staff back on site. We have 15,000 square feet of space, so we can safely have more staff on site. I do want to give a shout out to facilities because they've been great at giving us the extra support and making sure that the space is sanitized on a regular basis. We have lots of plexiglass that the facilities team helped us get in place. So we have those protective barriers. And we've rearranged the waiting room so we can have young people in the space in a safe way, and they're socially distanced. So telehealth is here to stay. I don't think we'll ever stop doing that because it works, especially for some patients and for some services. But we do want to move forward in this new year and coming back into the space and providing more day-to-day services for our young people. Right now we're at, when the pandemic hit last year, we plummeted, our numbers plummeted. We were around, we were less than 50%. We were around 40% of our capacity. We're now roughly at 75% of our capacity, which is great. We're moving in the right direction at getting services back up to speed to where we were pre-pandemic. Around 1/3 of our services are in person right now, and around 2/3 of our services are still telehealth. And I think we'll find over time that will balance out. Right. But again, all of these things that we've learned in 2020 will continue in 2021 and moving forward.
Thanks so much, Renee. Peter, could you just give us a little bit about the other services? What have we been able to bring back in the building?
So a lot of the essential services, like as folks have talked about, and the appointment-based services we brought back to the building. So it's like food, like other kinds of specific case management that needs to happen on site. So we brought all those services like, back 5 days a week. And, for other kinds of very, very specific appointment-based things where, I need to meet with a lawyer and I need to sign a specific piece of paper right now. Those are things that we've all brought on site. And in April, we're going to be moving to like a new staffing pattern, that will be adding in congregate programming in person, and also bringing back our high school equivalency in-person instruction. I do also just want to acknowledge my colleagues in housing. We have 100 units of supportive housing that has been open 24 hours, 7 days a week since the pandemic started. So my colleagues in housing have continued to provide in-person services like throughout the entirety of COVID-19. And so that's just a little bit about what we have been doing and also a little bit about what's ahead.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. So Holly, what do you think, what do the next 6 months look like?
So the next 6 months look pretty bright. I would say that at the door, the light never really went out. There's always been light and energy there, and it just feels now like it's being reinvigorated. So 555 Broome Street is alive.
And well.
Alive and well, yes. As we get ready to welcome back more staff in April, to welcome young people back to the building in increasing numbers. Our friends and partners at Broome Street Academy are coming back in April, so we'll have more young people and more staff in the building. It's really coming alive again. Renee is ramping up services down in the Adolescent Health Center. The programming team are going to have more pop-up events so that they can re-engage our community and revitalize our community. The expansion of essential services, the availability of tech pods so young people can come in and use tech pods for their televisits, their classes, for whatever technology needs that they have. We're going to be growing our workforce development programs. The spring is about growth. It's the same for the door. It's all about growth. Growing our college persistence programming and making sure that everybody has the support that they need to finish what they start. We are just looking forward to collaborating with our community partners at Little Island. Little Island's finally going to be open, and we're ready to be there. We're growing our summer youth employment program. Hudson Square Business Improvement District, partnering with them to provide some opportunities for young people. So we are just thinking, now's the time to think big. So we're thinking big.
That is inspiring. I love the idea of just like we're in spring. Spring is about growth. So beautiful. So Peter, the final question I'm going to pose to you, which is, why is the door, and how is the door, I guess, well positioned to be part of the city's recovery as we begin to see sort of the light at the end of the tunnel?
Thanks, Susan. So, the $1.9 trillion stimulus that was recently passed by Congress provides some really exciting benefits that we really want to make sure our young people access. 6 months ago, we created our very first full-time in-house benefit specialist who assists young people accessing a variety of benefits programs, and also more importantly, helps young people get access to vital documents that are required to even enroll in these programs. And this, is an extremely time-consuming process, but it really is something that we look forward to expanding and really partnering with the city as we kind of move forward to the next level of recovery. I also do want to just point out a quick fact that the other huge policy challenge ahead for us is how young people have been impacted on the employment end because of the pandemic. Yeah. The Center for New York City Affairs at the New School estimated a few months ago that nearly 20% of adults under 25 in the city had lost their jobs compared to 14% of all workers of all ages. And young people, account for 15% of the jobs in the hardest hit service industry sectors, even though they make up under 10% of the total city's workforce. So, what we're seeing right now, and as we hopefully see the secondary benefits of having the stimulus, is that we have a huge opportunity right now to get young people back involved in the labor market. And, these are some things that we will really have to partner really closely with the city on, because ultimately our young people have been hit the hardest by the employment trends. And it really will take a very bold strategy on the city government's end to really address this gap.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I want to thank all the panelists, Renee and Holly and Peter, for your leadership. I will say that on behalf of the board and even on behalf of New York City, we are indebted to the work that you and your colleagues do every single day to make sure that young people in our city are thriving and able to reach their full potential. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Super. Thank you, Susan. And you did just a terrific job leading that discussion. It's super interesting, and I work here, and I was just on the edge of my seat. It's super. I'm just thinking about, we got a bunch of questions from board members and from folks who are here watching the panel, but I wanted to start with one about Broome Street Academy. right after spring break, the public school spring break in early April, Broome Street Academy will be back in person in a staggered way. And Holly, I wonder if you would start with this question, because you think about education and in many ways the need for us to provide very tailored remedial help to students both at Broome Street Academy and at the door. Can you talk a little bit about both? How do we make up for what is invariably a bigger gap and a bigger remedial gap for students both at Broome Street and at the door? How do we do that? What's our approach? What's your thought about how to be effective in terms of catching kids up where we've lost ground?
That's a super question. And we've been thinking about this since last spring, when it was apparent that young people there were these gaps created by remote learning. And for young people who really need to be in a classroom with a teacher working one-on-one, that's really the best place for them to be. So a lot of young people are just going to benefit by being back in person. But what we've also tried to do is create programs in core areas where we feel young people have really fallen behind. So math skills have been crucial in offering tutoring and small group programs for young people to work on those skills.
That's interesting. And, you know, from the perspective of just remedial ed, and I think a lot of folks in the door community know this, is that when we went remote, we had already established an online learning platform in support of BSA students. How would you characterize the instruction over the course of the first part of the school year at BSA? What's worked well and what's been lost?
You know, the BSA team is amazing because they really, really know their students. And so for those students who worked well remotely, online platforms have been fine. For other students, they've really dug in and have been offering them on the one-on-one work that they need. They have tutoring available Monday through Saturday, and then additional one-on-one tutoring with a teacher if they need it. So I think that they've really, worked with each student to figure out what their gaps are and to fill those gaps.
Yeah, I think that's right. Peter, you talked a little bit with Susan a moment ago about city leadership. And I guess I wonder if de Blasio or Cuomo were on the panel and we had a chance to ask them some pointed, thoughtful questions. I guess, what would you offer to them as a leader in this community, as a leader of the door? Where is the city falling down, or where does the city need a boost in terms of really understanding how to support organizations like the door to be effective in what's to come as part of the recovery?
So, I think that's a great question, Eric, and I have two thoughts. Like, the first one is just to kind of build on what I shared with Susan earlier, is that the city really needs to come up with a very bold agenda, like for young adults to get young back into the workforce. And I think that should be a major priority for the next city administration. The other thing I just wanted to share is that, the door is one of hundreds of organizations doing business for the city of New York. And the human services sector has continued to provide vital public health and human services to New Yorkers throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, while also being extremely underfunded and underpaid. And, we are really disappointed to hear from the mayor's office about the recent decision to rescind the indirect cost rate that we agreed to in the 2020 budget that for the first time ever allowed nonprofits like ours to be paid a true indirect rate for city contracts. We found out in August 2020 that this funding would be cut by 40%. And literally we found out at the end of last week that the city is going to make an additional retroactive cut of 70% for this fiscal year. The door is one of 170 human service providers in New York City, calling on local government to support bringing back the indirect rate to what they promised us for the past fiscal year, this fiscal year, and moving forward. But we're also calling for a COLA increase for human service workers at a rate of at least 3%, and providing emergency pay for human service workers retroactive back to March of last year. And these are all things that, as a human services sector, we are all united about. The human services sector has provided critical services to the city of New York. And we've done a lot to help stabilize the city. And we deserve our fair share when it comes to city funding.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's thoughtful. Renee, over the course of the year, particularly our supporters have asked me this question over and over again, which is kind of like, so what's changing vis-a-vis the needs of the young people that the door serves? And, particularly at the clinic, and you oversee a really big part of the door, which includes primary care, family planning, and mental health programming. What do you know already will change in terms of the needs of the young people that you'll see? What's exacerbated? What's worse? What over time do you worry about from a clinical perspective in terms of what you'll have to do differently to catch up kids that have been disconnected from your care in 3 very big and unique areas?
As mentioned, mental health is an area that we need to really give time and attention to. And we recognize that early on in 2020. So as an agency, we actually developed the Mental Health Continuum. It's a work group of different programs across the agency and our mental health providers across the agency, from legal services, from BSA, from Broome Street Academy, from the Bronx Youth Center, from and the health center. So pulling together all of our mental health providers from across the agency and making sure that we're working together and not against each other and not in silos, but we're working together to make sure young people have different options when it comes to their mental health needs. So be it smaller groups, one-on-one psychotherapy, one-on-one psychiatry services, crisis intervention, et cetera. So that is a big area that we're focused on. This pandemic was hard for young people. And I think that's going to be a long-term issue that we're going to have to give time and attention to. We're continuously looking at expanding our mental health services in the health center. For example, we added our integrated behavioral health services. So the primary care providers in the health center are identifying young people with mental health services, mental health needs, and working in collaboration with the therapist and a psychiatrist to make sure that not just their medical needs are met, but it's done in collaboration with their mental health services. So it's a continuity of care for that young person. They shouldn't be 2 separate buckets, but the providers are working together. So that's something else that we worked on this year. And as kids get back to school and young people continue to look for employment and as the world opens up, as we like to say, as things open up, we're going to have to start looking at vaccines and making sure that we can provide testing. So that is something that we're constantly talking about and need to implement with this pandemic. But young people, the services, young people continue to need the same thing. They want their birth control. They need their chronic care medication. They want their eyeglasses. They do want to come in for dental services. I know as parents, some of us don't think that's true, but they do. So we need to make sure that those services continue and that they're seamless and that young people have access to those services. And I do have a story. I have a patient story from Dr. Elliott. She's our assistant medical director. And she said a young person actually reached out to the door asking for healthcare services. She was directed to the health center. She received news that one of her partners might have been HIV positive. She already went to the emergency room and she went to her primary care provider. It felt very rushed. It was overcrowded. She felt like she didn't get the time and attention that she needed. So she reached out to the door asking for referrals and was happy to hear that we were actually open. Dr. Elliott, during one of our we had a vaccine clinic for staff. She actually came down, didn't have appointment scheduled for that day and saw that young person on the same day. And that person in the end said she was very happy for the care that she received. She expressed that we showed time and attention, and we gave her the time that she needed. We gave her the testing that she needed. A health educator spent time with her, providing her with any health education and counseling that she requested. So those are the services that we're going to continue to see. And those are the stories that we'll continue to have in the health center. So really, overall, it's about access and making sure young people have access to the care that they need.
Thanks, Renee. That's helpful. I think we have time for one more. And Peter, you get the last one. Not so much about thinking retroactively to what we've done over the course of the year, but I just wonder, as you're as close to the ground and working as closely with our staff and young people as anyone, thinking about our model moving ahead. We are an anomaly in New York in that we have co-located and integrated the way we respond to young people in a really unique way. I guess I wonder, from your perspective, what permanently sticks in your mind as a change to the Doors model that in many ways necessitated by COVID just permanently changes the way we think about the way we access young people. And I guess I'm just looking for you to close us out with one or two examples of things that are just things that weren't the way we did business, now is part of our new normal, but will permanently stick in terms of the way that we'll continue to reach new people, new young people as we move ahead.
Thanks, Eric. That's a great question. And there's some incredible staff alumni, I think, on the call that have asked some questions that are somewhat connected to this. I think one of the reflections that we've had as a community is that I think, the membership is just a really great example of something that the changes that will stick. I think what the Door has always been a special place because it really views young people as they should be, holistically. And the Door is always, the Door was doing the social determinants of health, like back when that phrase wasn't even in existence. And I think like our membership model really captures like all the different needs that young people have. And I think one of the things that I'm really excited about in terms of like one of the pivots that we've made is making sure that our membership process is virtual so that, young people do not have to come to the building anymore to become a member of the Door. And I think this just opens up a very rich opportunity to be able to connect with young people that might have never traveled to come to our headquarters in Soho. And I think, with a lot of the technology infrastructure that we've invested in, a lot of the hybrid, there's some elements of the hybrid program delivery model, as folks have mentioned on the call, like ranging from like mental health counseling to other kinds of maybe low barrier like group programs, where it will make sense to be able to continue this like virtually. And also, just as folks know, we always run out of space at the Door because there's so much happening in the 70,000 square feet of the building. And we always don't have enough space for how many things that people want to do. And being able to find ways to be able to stay connected and to be able to maximize our space, both on site and virtually, I think is like the way forward. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. It does. I mean, I think that, what the supporters of the Door know is that we're a complicated ecosystem, and it's about trying to figure out just this pathway to which I think Renee sort of gets right. It's about access, and it's about meeting kids where they are and providing that access. I'm getting the high sign, so I think I would just conclude by just saying a couple things. One, thank you, Mark, to kicking us off and for leading the Doors board. Susan, you moderated this panel just effortlessly, so thank you so much. And to the panel, to Peter, to Renee, and Holly, you are, like our staff, just exceptional, professional, so driven by meeting our kids where they are, and your skill in the expertise where you lead the Door is just apparent every day to all of the team. And so to the supporters also who came on tonight, who've stood by the Door over almost 50 years, and particularly over the course of the last year, thank you so much. When we changed our model in March, we reached out to the funding community, both government and private, and you all stood with us, and it was apparent and it's consistent, and we know you'll be with us into the next year as we continue to bring our city back. And I know a lot of our staff is on, and obviously our hats off to all of you because you all run this place and do a great job every day. So thank you to everybody who's been a big supporter of the Door in all of these different areas. And just personally for me, it's been an honor to be a part of the Door, a New York institution like no other. So thank you all so much. We hope we've given you another snapshot into what makes the Door remarkable, and hope you have a great evening. And thank you so much for standing by the Door. Good night.